welcome back to another edition of the 5-Star Podcast of Wrestling. It is week number 20 since this show began. I am your host, Sean Meyers, joined by co-host Justin Lowery. Justin, how are you doing on this lovely Thursday evening?
Just excellent.
Taking it all in, huh?
Yes.
So we are now, 10 days away from the WWE's second biggest pay-per-view of the year, SummerSlam. Before we get into the specifics of Raw with this Raw recap, does it feel like it's this close to what should be the closest thing to WrestleMania in the WWE calendar year?
No. Honestly, if I didn't know it was SummerSlam, I would think we're just lining up for another B-level pay-per-view, like a No Mercy or Vengeance or Extreme Rules. It doesn't really have a big hype-type feel to it.
What do you attribute that to? Because I know specifically on the Raw side, something we've mentioned the last couple weeks is there's nothing really new. It's sort of continuations of feuds that have been going on. That's one side of it. I don't think that's the case on SmackDown, but is that enough to kind of put a damper on the expectations, or is it just the overall poor quality of the product on both brands over the past couple of months?
I think there's many factors. The rematches galore is one factor, and the poor quality. There's nothing really too exciting going on in general. It's just very blah. It's just going through the motions. It's bad, and to be honest, I'm looking forward to watch NXT TakeOver the Saturday before, the day before, than I am the actual main event of SummerSlam.
The Raw side certainly has some question marks in terms of their contributions to the SummerSlam card. And we're going to get into not only some of the feuds that have been developing and that were facilitated this past Monday, but later on when we get to the trending topics segment, we're actually going to provide maybe some thoughts on what we would like the card to see, what our ideal SummerSlam card would be for this year. But first, let's deal in reality and go back to Monday night. The main event, I will give WWE credit. It was certainly highly anticipated. It was the first ever Monday Night Raw match in the career of Ronda Rousey. And quite frankly, it was one that, anticipation because it's her debut, not because of necessarily the magnitude of the match itself and the quality of opponent. As you can see, she went against Alicia Fox. I will give Alicia Fox credit. I will give her props. She has been probably criminally underrated throughout her career. I think that she's been a very capable worker and probably should have been featured more often than she has. The reality, however, in 2018 is she does not move the needle whatsoever. There was zero doubt what the result of this match was going to be. Ronda Rousey won pretty convincingly. Your just initial reactions on how she looked in this match, which maybe wasn't as impressive as her first two performances.
I guess you beat me to it there. I was going to say, out of all the matches I've seen her so far in, this was her worst. I mean, I'm not trying to say that, it's degrading, it wasn't bad by any means. I do think her opponent had something to do with it. Alicia Fox is, decent, okay. She's a good character. But, it wasn't anything special. I will say Fox did take a beating. I mean, Rousey, works, pretty hard, and she took a couple good licks in there. And
was it too stiff? Is that something that could be concerning going forward? Because we know Brock Lesnar gets away with stuff like that, but if Ronda's going to be wrestling more regularly, will that work?
Right. Honestly, I think for like her character and who she is, she kind of has to be more stiff, right? I mean, that's just who she is. So if you take that away from her, you take what's kind of special away from her. She's the MMA fighter, so she has to be a little bit more stiff.
Well, what if it results in an injury? Let's say next time she has a match, which will be at SummerSlam, let's say she legitimately hurts Alexa Bliss. Maybe not a serious injury, but puts Alexa on the shelf for a month or two. Does it become something that it becomes a warning?
It might be something they look at then. I mean, until then, Brock's never injured anyone except, I think Orton at one time at a SummerSlam, right? And that was, things to the face. And they already planned out previously that they were going to bust him open the hard way, but he just kind of took it a little too far. they're not going to do that with the women at all, I don't think. You could work stiff and still be safe. I mean, you might be sore and bruised, but stiff shots to the back or something, I think are okay, if the opponent's willing, not the face. I think it will be fine.
Do you think this match, again, it's her third all-time match in WWE, first one on regular TV, does this help sell SummerSlam to the casual fan seeing her actually in the ring?
No, I can't say.
I agree with you.
I do think she's a star, so that's why I kind of paused there. But, I did look at the ratings. They did drop like they always do in the third hour. She did hold more, though. The drop wasn't as significant than it normally is, so there is that. She definitely held well, but people still tuned out. They still didn't break 3 million people once again. So, at this point, I don't think really anyone can, jar the needle right now, even Lesnar. Vince thinks he does, but he doesn't. Maybe it might, make a handful of people maybe want to watch, but I think people that are going to watch are already going to watch. That main event didn't sway them either way.
One last thing on this. Are you annoyed at all by the fact that Alexa always has to have a sidekick and now seemingly Ronda always has to be with Natalya?
They do that a lot with the women. You ever notice that? Bayley and Sasha, Charlotte, Becky. Even Carmella, James Ellsworth. They're always, friends. I don't like it. Why?
Especially with Ronda Rousey.
Right, and I think we all know, too, we're all waiting for Natalya to turn on her. That's going to happen. It's not a if, it's just a when. And for me, Natalya's annoying as all hell. And when she comes out and smiles and she, look, oh, look, I'm Ronda's best friend. That's, oh, God. If I was her, I would be embarrassed by that. And Alexa Bliss doesn't need a sidekick. She's,
But she's had one for, a year straight now, it seems like.
Right, but if they, why? Okay,
I agree.
They wanted Nikki something to do. Nikki's a vet. She's good at what she does. Okay, but why does she need, Foxy now? It makes. No, I guess you could say she's trying to use a sidekick to do her fighting for her. So maybe there's a reasoning there.
But I don't like that being all the time. I think you pick your spots.
As a heel, though, champion, that's how her squirming out of certain situations, and maybe that's how you can find that acceptable. Where Ronda Rousey doesn't need a friend. She doesn't need somebody. She's tough as it is. She doesn't need somebody watching her back.
Let's move on to what I thought was a darn good match on Monday Night Raw, and the reaction even more notable. It was the matchup early in the night between Roman Reigns and Constable Baron Corbin. And as I mentioned, the reaction from the crowd was very significant because a week after some of the fans were chanting, "We want Roman," during the somewhat awkward exchange between Brock Lesnar and Paul Heyman and Kurt Angle, Roman in Florida this past week got a very positive reaction in his match against Baron Corbin. Now, Corbin is in my opinion, one of the truest heels in WWE. And I say that, Justin, not because he's some sort of, great, skillful person on the mic who can turn the crowd against him. Not because he's a great in-ring performer and that instantly makes him even bigger of a star. It's because he doesn't do anything that the fans like. He doesn't show any humor. He just doesn't do anything that makes him entertaining in a sense, which makes him really a person that no one wants to cheer for. So Corbin gets a good reaction in terms of the faces against him usually always get cheered. But with Roman getting cheered and them having a really good match, you do have to feel like, if nothing else, Roman, at least heading into SummerSlam, has a little bit of momentum.
True. I'm still a little iffy just because it's been, so long. The last couple of weeks, they haven't been in wrestling hotbeds, per se. He's always going to get cheered in Florida. The Rock, it's just the connection down there in Miami. They're going to love him. There's still some boos, but it's more prominent in his favor. I do think the New York crowd's going to eat him alive. I could be wrong.
I would agree. I would agree with you. I mean, there's times where Roman's gotten cheered at house shows and at lesser cities, and then he goes to the big cities and the big matches.
The next time they're in Des Moines, Iowa, they're going to cheer him because that's just what. But when you get in like the bigger, East Coast cities, Chicago, they're going to, I think they're going to destroy the match. I mean, not even this Roman. I think they're just going to poo-poo on the whole match. But that we could save that for a different day. But if you're Vince, you have to be liking it, right? You have to be going, okay, it's working. And I think maybe it's more people really are sick of Lesnar, which that's what they want. They're making Lesnar trying to be as evil, the biggest, ass that he could be to get Roman over.
Which probably doesn't take a lot of work. I mean, Brock Lesnar is pretty legitimately, seems like that's the type of person he is.
Right, and that's... But isn't that, what wrestling's supposed to be? Take something of who you really are, turn it up a little bit, and that's why it becomes more believable.
This match, you think of it as a Roman Reigns match because he's the bigger of the stars, but it was really more so about building for Baron Corbin because they intertwined the Finn Balor angle with Finn coming out, preventing Corbin from escaping. Ultimately, it was Finn that, in a sense, cost Corbin the match. So they're headed towards their rematch at SummerSlam, one that probably not a lot of people are clamoring for. That being said, are you to the point now that you consider Baron Corbin one of the top guys on Raw, on a side that really doesn't have a lot of heels?
Well, I think in weeks past, I've discussed how I like Baron Corbin. I think he's improving, and I think you're seeing that. They are lacking, like you were talking about, true heels. I mean, there's a lot of cool heels. There's a lot of, take a look at Elias. He comes out, people chant with him. And then he rips the city, then they finally boo him. But they want to chant along with him. There's nothing that Corbin does that they want to do together with him. I mean, they hate him. They absolutely hate him. And him being Stephanie's puppet, I think, also helps in that. Because, I think he's decent on the mic. He's improving greatly in the ring. And he's doing his job well. And what was it, last year at this time? Vince gave him, Money in the Bank? Was it last year where he won it?
Yeah, and then he lost to Cena at this event at SummerSlam a year ago.
They had faith in him to, possibly, win the title. And I do think he's a future champion down the line. Even if it's a transitional type run, he's not going to hold it very long. I do expect him to hold the belt at some point in his career.
A guy that I think everyone would agree is a future champion is Braun Strowman. However, I would say when you think about Braun Strowman's momentum and what it was at maybe 6 months ago, even 3 months ago, despite the fact that he has the briefcase, Justin, I don't think he's as hot as he was before, and I think that's a result of bad booking. What he did on this past edition of Raw was just... It's almost to the point now where he's like a Stone Cold Steve Austin, where he just has to have some sort of absurd skit almost every single week. And this past Monday was flipping over the stage that was occupied not only by Kevin Owens, his SummerSlam opponent, but for some reason Jinder Mahal and Sunil Singh, who were sort of pairing with KO for this storyline. It led to a match between Jinder and Braun Strowman, and ironically, it was one that actually Jinder won by countout. They were playing up the fact that Braun could lose his briefcase by any means in the match at SummerSlam, even if it is by countout. This isn't a good enough use of Braun Strowman, and quite frankly, I don't think it's really a great use of Kevin Owens. Yeah, it's a cool visual to see the stage flipped over, but for me, these guys should be doing so much more. And Jinder being mixed in, it just seems like they're just trying to keep it fresh, since Owens and Strowman have been already feuding for quite some time, one-on-one.
They missed the boat on Strowman, a year ago when he was at his peak, and they didn't pull the trigger?
I think at WrestleMania this past year, that would have been, the time to really feature him.
And I guess the main reason they didn't is they wanted Roman to be the guy. So, in a sense, because of that, you still don't know if that's going to work. And it probably isn't going to work to the level that they want it to work, even if it does. You kind of ruined Strowman's momentum. And people said a year ago, they were worried about that. This guy's the hottest guy in the company. Pull the friggin' trigger. I know Vince, and then they have a plan. They want this to be the guy, and that's what they want. But sometimes, you have to let the fans tell you what they want. He says he listens to the fans. We all know that's a bunch of crap. Because if they did, Strowman would have won the title.
Isn't Strowman a prototypical Vince guy anyway?
Well, right, like he's the big, muscular guy, and he's just naturally big. That's what Vince loves.
Who has good acting skills, who has good facial skills.
If you look at him and Roman's clearly the more attractive guy. Okay, he's probably better off on the Jimmy Fallon and Jimmy Kimmel, those type of interviews. He probably comes off better in PR stuff than Strowman does with the long beard and stuff. But does that really matter? I mean, someone might turn on Jimmy Fallon, see Braun Strowman sitting in a chair and go, whoa, man, that guy's a freak. Like, I want to see him in a match. You got to give him a shot. They didn't give him that chance to run with it. So until you give somebody the brass ring, as Vince likes to say, he went, he grabbed it, let him run with it, see what he can do. Worst case is, you give him a couple months like you did Jinder. If you gave Jinder a friggin' chance, how do you not give Braun Strowman a chance?
Is the, as I mentioned, the week after week of tipping over porta-johns or stages or ambulances, is that starting to run its course with you? Because I could say from my perspective, I think it has.
Well, yes, because when you do stuff like that, it eventually runs its course. You can only do so many different things to show his feat of strength, or eventually you just run out of ideas, or you're mimicking one another.
It reminds me of like Jeff Hardy, where he had to top what he did at the prior pay-per-view, jumping off of something or through something back in the early 2000s each and every time.
And eventually you're gonna peak it out, where okay, that's the coolest thing he could do. Everything else do after that's like, well, okay, that wasn't as cool as last week, or that wasn't as cool as 3 weeks ago.
I think his stuff with Roman was the coolest, where he's pushing when Roman was in the gurney or whatever. I think that stuff was probably the best, and it meant a lot more than what this means with Owens and Jinder.
To me, what he did Monday was more comical. It wasn't like aggression or there was some type of personal vengeance. It was more like, look at Strowman, and the way everybody reacts. It's so over the top. I know they're supposed to show fear, but it's so over the top. It's more like, it's more like a comedy skit, right? I mean, I feel like it's more like a comedy skit.
I want to touch on a few things very, very quickly, and then I can sort of leave you with your final thoughts. Elias Lashley, much like Roman, got a great reaction. They were chanting his name. I know that was the goal. I think give full credit to Elias and he's probably the top entertainer on Raw right now. What he was doing with the documentary camera crew, just hilarious. Seth Rollins without a partner, it seems like they are absolutely hinting at Ambrose eventually helping him. Will they swerve? Maybe, but it certainly looks like it's heading that direction. Ruby Riott was a return that I think was a welcome sight, although the means of her coming in a disguise, why? Why would she need a disguise to help her teammate?
I don't know. They wanted a sense of mystery for a second. I don't know.
I can't think of a reason. And lastly, Paul Heyman's interview, I think, is something that people are going to remember. I saw a lot of people on Twitter saying best promo, best interview they've seen in years. I wouldn't go that far because it was sort of like, what was the purpose of it? It was kind of my question, but Heyman, whenever you give him a mic, he adds an element that almost no one else on the roster can bring. So what of any of those things or anything else did you really take away from this Raw?
I mean, but the highlight for me was the Paul Heyman promo. He's a genius. Yeah, I mean, I know you know this. I'm a huge ECW fan. That was my favorite, growing up. I watched it religiously. I have every ECW documentary you can have. So in change, I love Paul Heyman. I think he's a genius. I mean, he makes his mistakes and everything, but creatively, he's good. He's great on the mic. I mean, young guys coming up in the business should learn from him. Hopefully he gives wisdom, and he'd be great down at NXT in promo classes. He knows how to convey emotion. And, I mean, he's perfect at it. I mean, you can go throughout the history just his time in WWE. He's cut some amazing, amazing promos. his eye, everything about it, it was good. It was great work to see. Yeah, Elias once again entertaining, and I love how he called out Bobby Lashley for getting the word.
I chuckled at that too. You have to do something like that when you're in a feud, right?
And I mean, if you screw up that bad, you really have to address it, and and it's perfect. I mean, the documentary, it's clearly that they have plans for Elias. What type of plans? I mean, I don't know if we know yet, but I do hope he beats Bobby Lashley. I don't think it's going to happen. I think Lashley will win. We'll probably talk about that next week. All in all, though, I say it's below average Raw. The Charlotte Bailey stuff, Sasha Bailey stuff is, to me...
It's a holding pattern. They're just waiting.
Right. I was really amped for the turn, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, we have to forget about it. Like, completely don't even, like... But other than that, that's kind of like, is what it is. That's, nothing great happened. I'm glad we didn't get, Roman and Seth as a tag team again. I feel like that's just everything they fall back on is the Shield stuff. Keep them apart for a while. I mean, the Shield's great, but do we need to really see them reunited every couple weeks? That's
all. The answer is no to that.
Exactly. That's all. And, a typical Raw, what I've come to expect week to week. It's hard to stay awake.
Well, they certainly will need to have a big show this upcoming Monday. It is the go-home show before SummerSlam. So we'll see how this upcoming one was. But for now, that was our look back at Monday night with the Raw recap. We'll be back with the SmackDown summary. And again, later we will give our ideal dream matches for this year's SummerSlam if we were coming up with the card on trending topics as well. But for Justin Lowery, Sean Meyers signing off. Remember to follow us on Twitter, 5-Star Pod Wrestle, and you can like our YouTube page as well. But this was the Raw recap on the 5-Star Podcast of Wrestling.